part of what makes BattleTech such a great system is that you can play it in a lot of different ways. You can just play classic BattleTech, but then you can scale it by adding in infantry or vehicles and aerotech and that sort of thing. Or you could play with spaceships. Or you could play Alpha Strike, of course, get more stuff on the table. Or you could play the RPGs. But something that BattleTech doesn't offer at all, like by default, is solo and co-op play. Of course, there are some fan-made simulations of opponents in BattleTech and Alpha Strike, and there's one I would like to cover in the near future on this channel as well. But it's not like officially built into the rules, and especially classic BattleTech is a little bit difficult to do that for, I think, because it's so complicated and very nuanced, I would say. And I would say that that is a problem when it comes to playing your beloved miniatures games with people who don't like competitive games. Like maybe you have friends who are into board games, but they just don't like the sort of games where you are directly trying to defeat the other person. I have a lot of people in my life I play board games with, and my girlfriend as well, and they don't seem to mind Euro games where you indirectly compete against each other. But when it comes to games where you're directly trying to, let's say, kill your enemies, that's the sort of thing that they don't really like. And that's a bit of a problem. So recently, I started getting into the idea of finding a game that I can play together with my girlfriend, with my other friends who don't like to play competitive games, and also expand my hobby. And I've got 2 projects now. Both are 15mm scale, because as I was looking into stuff and I decided I wanted something that's portable, that doesn't need a lot of like heavy terrain, and I found 15mm scale, which I've never really looked into before, and found out that 15mm is actually a pretty fun scale, because you can still have like very characterful miniatures, but they're still very tiny, and because they're tiny, they weigh next to nothing, even if they're metal models. So this is the first of those new projects that I'd like to showcase here on this channel. Something I've always loved, even as a kid, was ancient history. Ancient Rome, ancient Greece. I love those stories and all that fascinating history for time very, very long gone by. But where we still know so much about because it was all preserved in history. If I didn't end up doing what I do now professionally, I probably would have ended up studying Latin or something else in that vein. Maybe I'd be an archaeologist or something now. Anyway, as I was looking into different possibly co-op games out there, I stumbled upon a small genre that I didn't know was a genre. And it's Gladiator games. Gladiator games, of course. That's the perfect kind of game where you only need a couple of miniatures on the board, on the table, because you can have like solo gladiator battles, or maybe if you want to up the ante a little bit, you can throw in some animals or have like tag matches, not tag matches, but team matches. So it's the perfect kind of game that fits in a very small box, especially if it's 15mm and weighs next to nothing. You can take that with you, you can play it anywhere. And I looked through a lot of the options, and what very much attracted me was a game called Red Sand Blue Sky by 2 Hour War Games. And the thing that attracted me is the playing board. Instead of like a tabletop wargaming table where you have some terrain, you actually use this very board gamey sort of map here, which I thought was perfect because you don't need anything to play the game, you just need the tiny map. And then I started, of course, looking at some miniatures with which to play this game, and I did in fact find that there are quite a few options when it comes to 15mm gladiator figures out there. Some of them weren't amazing, some of them were better than the others, but what I ended up ordering the other day was 12 different gladiators from Strategia Nova in Italy. Of course, I mean, it's Roman gladiators, you've got to have Italian miniatures. Anyway, 12 different ones. As you can see, they are very tiny. There's a good variety of different gladiators here. All the classics are here. I'm sorry, I don't remember all the names yet. It's been a while since I've studied this stuff. But what I really noticed here is that 15mm is still a very nice scale, because they are small, but they still have a lot of detail and they're still very playable. Now here's let's say an atlas for scale. So you can see it's still very tiny, not as tiny as 6mm, but very tiny nonetheless. As you can see here, very nice variety of gladiators. This one might be my favorite because it's got the trident and a knit that you can actually see through. You've got the classics here. I don't remember the names, but the guy with the fun holy mask and the big shield here. Can't wait to paint that guy. Or the basic ones with just a sword and a shield and a helmet of some sort. Something that also attracted me about 15mm miniatures is that, as I mentioned once again, they do have detail more than 6mm, but they're still very quick to paint. I've only painted one just for this video. This guy, I think he might be a Trex. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about the bronze cap there, but it was very fun to paint. It doesn't take long. It takes minutes to do these guys at like a level that I find acceptable. You don't have to be a master painter to have these guys look pretty or right on the field here. Just try to put some color into these guys. I think I'm gonna do 6 red guys and 6 blue ones, so you can have a little bit of like color distinction on the board, but this is sort of the look I'm going for. Gonna have to think about skin tones a little bit, because I don't think everyone in ancient Rome fighting gladiator battles was like white, but it's been a long while since I've painted like skin tones. My last 40k army was Dark Elders, and I tried to avoid the horrible head sculpt without helmets at all costs, because they were fucking horrible back then. And that's the last time that I've painted skin tones, so like over 15 years ago. Pretty happy with this guy. It was sort of a experiment. Might change the color of the helmet there. Not sure I like the bronze. The problem is I don't really know how to highlight bronze. I just put a bronze base coat and then tried to do some highlights and then put a wash on it. Washes seem to work really nicely on this scale, because they do have detail, and the wash gets into those recesses pretty well, and then you can just highlight pretty quickly. Maybe the highlights on this shield are a little bit too similar, but anyway, that's sort of the style. I think for basing, as you can see, I've based this guy on like a 15mm washer, metal washer, and it still weighs actually nothing. Like the CGL plastic mechs weigh more than this guy, and this guy's out of metal, so weight isn't an issue. I played a couple of test games of this red sand, blue sky, and I like the system. It's very similar to BattleTech in the way that you can hit different parts of the gladiators. You can slice open their belly or destroy their arm with a well-aimed shot. But I found some issues with the system. It's a lot of dice rolling, and a lot of time not much happens because the gladiators are so evenly matched. Maybe that could be fixed if I just had different gladiators, but that was my experience in those first couple of games. Or maybe I just had bad luck, which I often do with dice. But there is a sequel of sorts to Red Sand Blue Sky, and it's called Red Sand Black Moon. And the fun part is that it enables you to use fantasy miniatures in your gladiator game. So you can have, like, I don't know, orcs and vampires fighting gladiator battles, which sounds very good to me. And I might try those rules with these gladiators and see if I like that rule system better. It's a little bit more streamlined, but I just haven't had the time to try those rules out quite yet. So that's my first project with 15mm models. The other one is a little bit more involved. I really wanted something that's very small, fits in one box, no terrain, minimal amount of miniatures, something that I can whip out and play pretty quickly. That's the idea here. And I feel like I've found a pretty good game. I might try different Gladiator rule sets in the future as well. And maybe, just maybe, I'll post up like a game of Gladiator fighting on this channel at some point. Maybe if it's well received and people like it, maybe I'll even do like a let's play of it or something. Anyway, that's pretty much the video for this time. Thanks for watching and listening, even despite my weird voice. I've been a little bit sick. And see you next time.